I do want to talk about the think pieces that have been out thus far, trying to explain why she lost. And I'll start with Washington Post, how Kamala Harris and Joe Biden lost to Donald Trump and left Democrats in shambles. They're in shambles. They are in shambles. I think it's a fair assessment. Okay, it starts with Biden. Biden sucked. He refused to meet with pollsters. He dug in. We had one of the Pod Save America guys out over the weekend saying Biden's internal polls showed that he was going to lose like 49 states, something like, or 400 electoral votes, something incredible in this election, and still thought he could win somehow. So the general consensus is F Joe Biden. Thanks for coming to where most of us were before. The country's been saying that since the Brandon thing. Let's go Brandon thing. Then I love this. They're blaming Kamala Harris's campaign manager. That makes sense. Of course, you'd always blame the campaign manager to some extent. And yet no one has yet blamed Kamala Harris. Truly, like in all these pieces, I have yet to see the person say, she was terrible. She couldn't connect. She couldn't give straight answers. They're much more comfortable, I've got to say, with the white female campaign manager and the white male campaign manager. None of them wants to lay a glove on Kamala. What did Jen O'Malley Dillon do wrong? Well, she insisted on having a larger role in the messaging process. She had come over from Team Biden. Aides just fired ideas into the void. You'd have someone say, what about too risky for too long? And O'Malley Dillon and other senior advisors rejected those pushes as well as others push for just a single word, dangerous. Now, this is obviously campaign aides who felt, to steal a term, unheard by Jen O'Malley Dillon. And now we're like, if only she had taken my great ideas, we would have won. This is all just like teaspoons in the ocean stuff. They're totally not getting it. And the piece goes on to say, finally, the group settled on what they privately called the 3 U's or the triple U's. Unhinged, unstable, and unchecked. Now, they're right. That's a terrible idea. And they went on to point out that one campaign responded by saying, no one even in the campaign was able to even remember the 3 U's. I just said them, and even I don't remember. Unhinged, that was one of them. Like, it's not catchy. I'll give you one more, and then I'll get your reaction. One person says, okay, this one's correct, because they went to somebody who works for Joe Manchin. It's very simple. If you try to win elections by talking to the elites of this country, you're going to get your ass kicked. There are not enough Beyoncés, Oprahs, or Hollywood elites to elect anyone. And then they go on to talk about how linked their party is to the elites. So of those first two, some Biden blame. Yes, he stuck around for a long time, but I don't think Biden was the answer to their problems. And I do not think messaging was it. And I do think connection to elites is relevant, but they have yet to get to the real core, ladies. You tell me what you think the real core is. Eliana, I'll start with you.
The core of the problem, I think, is what the Democratic Party has come to stand for. And I think the framing of that piece is sort of misleading. It frames it as was it Biden or was it Harris? And the truth is that it was both, because they came to stand for the same thing. Biden had a very problematic record, and Harris then refused to distance herself from that record. So it was both of them. It's not that complicated. But the Democratic Party spent the last 4 years telling voters that the issues that were most important to them, which were the economy and immigration, that inflation as it relates to the economy, first that it was transitory, and then that they weren't reading data right, and that actually, things were getting better. And on immigration, telling them that it wasn't a problem, and you just can't win elections that way. Can't win elections that way by telling voters that the things that they perceive as problems aren't problems.
That was 100% what they did, Emily. They go on like piecemeal to go through like some of the problems without really getting to the heart of it. They point out, here's when they get to Kamala Harris. She took some, quote, bananas, end quote, positions back in 2019 that came back to haunt her. Yes, she did. That should be playing a lot higher in your piece, WAPO. And her innate unlikability and inability to communicate with people is another. They talk about how now they see the John Kelly fascist stuff as a mistake. Many of us were telling them that all along. It was rejected. Now they're second guessing having her final speech at the Ellipse because it brought up January 6th, which they now are acknowledging may have not been a very powerful closing message. And they get to finally, she went on The View and she didn't distance herself from Joe Biden. Like, I love all these piecemeal, hits. I don't disagree with those piecemeal hits, but to Eliana's point, they're not getting it. Like what she said. The inflation, if you look at all the polls, what the viewers cared about, they cared about the voters. 3 things, the top 3 things. And there's a really interesting survey out right now backing it up. Inflation, immigration, and cultural issues.
Yeah, and it's so obvious. I mean, and to some extent, this is why the campaign was always going to be, even though you have Donald Trump is polarizing, like his numbers by election day were higher than they had been in a very long time. His favorables, arguably, if you're looking across like RCP's national average, his favorability was higher than it had ever been. That said, he's still polarizing to a lot of Americans. So they had a shot of doing something, even with inflation and immigration where it was, but they would basically have had leaned so hard into the nuts and bolts kitchen table issues. And even with a terrible candidate like Kamala Harris, which everyone has to agree that she's just a bad candidate. She's not a good national politician. Even so, she got like 47% of the popular vote. So there was a world in which Kamala Harris could have been banging the table, talking about immigration, talking about inflation, distancing herself from Joe Biden over and over and over again. She would have had to do that. And not running on January 6th, not running on fascism. Interestingly enough, if you look at the RCP national average of the polling, where you saw Kamala Harris start to dip was on October 23rd. That is the day after the Atlantic story about John Kelly saying that Trump wanted generals like Hitler. That's the day after that story came out. It never recovered after that, which is super interesting because Kamala Harris and Democrats took that story, literally projected it onto Madison Square Garden the night of Trump's rally and started talking about it nonstop for days afterwards. That should have been obvious that it was distracting from their kitchen table pitch, that their kitchen table pitch wasn't strong enough to begin with. All of these things, it's just so obvious. And to watch the hand-wringing right now from, like, as you said, Megyn, John Favreau of Pod Save America, who was covering up for Biden's age over and over again. I mean, it's just like it's okay for them to say some of the obvious and to explore some of the obvious, but they were the ones that were enforcing this really strict position where you couldn't speak truth for months and months. So yes, welcome to the party, everyone, but I'm not impressed by your sudden realizations.
Just this morning on the New York Times podcast, The Daily, Eliana, they were going through, why her message didn't resonate, and they were trying to take on the economy and inflation. And just the nerve of these guys, the nerve. Where was your honesty about this before the election, when voters were looking for the straight scoop? And frankly, your readers may have been looking for the straight scoop on where she was going wrong prior to the vote. Think about it from their perspective. They wanted to help Kamala Harris. Why wouldn't some honesty prior to the election have done that? Why wouldn't some questions to her, pressing the weaknesses in her position, which tend to shore up a candidate rather than cut them down, have been appropriate prior to November 5? So what they did, we're talking about this morning on the New York Times, this audience is going to appreciate this acutely, was, she tried to speak to economic issues, but she had very pinprick strikes that didn't appeal to a wide swath of voters. I have been saying this, and my audience has been writing me about this for months. It's great that she wants to give the child tax credit, but unless you have a child in its first year, it really doesn't help you. It's great that she wants to help first-time home buyers, but the vast majority of Americans are not in that place in their life, either because they're not yet ready to buy one, they're not interested, they want to rent, or they already bought their first home. It's like her constant focus on diabetes medication. Oh, okay, great if you're a diabetic. Most of us aren't. And even the New York Times is now admitting these were too small. And you look over at Trump and he's like, I will take on China I will war with tariffs. I will make sure manufacturing jobs stay here. Stuff that will help everybody, all of the U.S. economy. And he had 4 years to point to where he actually did have a booming economy.
Yeah, on the economy, Harris did look. There's two separate issues. One is the messages they chose on the various issues, and the other is her ability to articulate and answer questions about issues, and both were problematic. She did try to talk about inflation, but her message on it was, I'm going to address price gouging. And I just don't think that the average American thinks that the manager of the Safeway down the street or the Piggly Wiggly or whatever is like that their groceries are expensive and shot up, eggs cost 3 times more because Safeway is price gouging. I don't think, and I'd be curious to see polling numbers on this, I don't think people really believe that, and I would have a hard time thinking that that resonates with people. The other is her ability to have exchanges with voters and reporters about these issues. You mentioned, the Pod Save America bros pressing the weaknesses in her positions. She just did not prove herself a capable candidate in terms of having those sorts of exchanges. And that gets to her just weakness in terms of candidate skills and to the Democratic Party's process around this. And that they decided, because Biden decided to run, and then he decided, you could even go further back. He decided to pick a vice president based on checking gender and race boxes, which he said explicitly at the time. Then he decided to run again. Then he decided to bow out and elevate her without having any sort of competitive process, that she just had not been put through the paces by the time she was elevated to the top of the national ticket. And it really did produce sort of, I would say, a perfect storm for the Republican side, but a disastrous storm for Democrats, where they had a candidate who chose bad policy positions and then couldn't articulate, articulated them poorly.
Grand Canyon University, a private Christian university in beautiful Phoenix, Arizona, believes that we are endowed by our Creator with certain unalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. GCU believes in equal opportunity and that the American dream starts with purpose. By honoring your career calling, you can impact your family, friends, and your community. Change the world for good by putting others before yourself. Whether your pursuit involves a bachelor's, master's, or doctoral degree, GCU's online, on-campus, and hybrid learning environments are designed to help you achieve your unique academic, personal, and professional goals. With over 340 academic programs as of June of 24, GCU meets you where you are and provides a path to help you fulfill your dreams. The pursuit to serve others is yours. Let it flourish. Find your purpose at Grand Canyon University. Private, Christian, affordable. Visit gcu.edu. Thanks so much for watching. If you like what you just saw, hit the subscribe button for more clips and full episodes.